Now, to look at the United States, to look at the third factor, the corporate consumer culture. I'm sorry. I want to look a little bit more at what's going on in the United States. Also, this is the gonorrhea infection and syphilis infection rates. Again, Sarah Palin is part of the Tea Party movement, and they're arguing Christianity is good for societies. Again, within the United States, gonorrhea infection rates are highest in the Southeast, which is has the most religious part of the country, the most Christian. In a study, the studies have come out, and I commented on this, both in Pediatrics and the Washington Post, showing, and agreeing with a lot of other research, that the abstinence-only policies put out by the religious right, which are very commonly used in the United States, are backfiring. They're actually adding to our rates of teen pregnancy and STD infections. Divorce. The religious right keeps talking about how Christian family values are suppress divorce, and here are major Christian leaders who are all divorcees. And the evangelical Americans have the highest divorce rates in the country. Now, American violence. The Bible, they cite as a way to learn not to kill other human beings, but the Bible stories suggest the opposite. This is the story of Jephthah, the daughter of an Israelite king, sacrificed to God so he could win a victory over Israelite enemies. I'm not going to go into a lot of this about why the Bible is so bad. You may even know that. And what I was waiting for was a study that would show this. You know, people have done studies on does watching violent video games, violent television contribute to rates of violence? They did this with having college students read the Bible. More violent passages, and sure enough, they showed higher rates of aggression. In the southern United States, we had an extremely Christian culture that set up the Jim Crow apartheid state, which was also a lynching culture where they regularly lynched black people for minor infractions. And this research has shown that rates of religion, high rates of religiosity are correlated, particularly conservative religion, are correlated with high rates of racism. This is a paper I published last year, which hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet. I wish it would. What I did was I disproved the existence of a good, benign God by looking at the death rates of children. 100 billion children have been born so far. Half of them, 50 billion, have died from diseases, which are acts of God according to Christianity and to most religious doctrines. And most conceptions don't make it to term either. So if there is a God, this is a God that's allowed mass death of children. And this basically, since there isn't a good God, this whole idea of running a country on a religious basis is an absurd one. It doesn't work. And in terms of the mortality rates of the United States, we have such very high mortality rates. The bottom is the percent of gross national product that is dedicated to health care. The United States dedicates far more money to health care than any other country per person, or as a portion of gross national product than any other Western nation, and yet we're getting these ridiculously high mortality rates, both among young and adults. And one of the reasons for that is that we need to go to our universal system. Universal systems are more cost efficient, but the religious right in our country continues to basically oppose these policies for various reasons. Now for the idea that corporations want the United States to become a religious theocracy, that Karl Rove, President Bush's advisor, was behind this and that sort of thing. And that the opposite is true. William Jennings Bryan, an early American creationist, was also a progressive Democrat who realized that the corporations are a big danger towards religion. But after World War II, Bill Buckley in the United States and others allied to form the Republican Alliance of the Religious Right and the corporations, and they thought this was a good idea. But there are problems with this. This is from Acts 4, which is the first description of a Christian church. It talks about how they had no property in that church. There were no needy persons above them, and God kills off a married couple for not turning over their property. So early Christianity was actually communistic. And we had the strange phenomena where Herbert Spencer was an agnostic who was for Darwinian economics, and Ayn Rand, she's being cited currently as a hero of the Tea Party movement. She was an extreme atheist, and also for Darwinian economics. So there's strange complexities going on here. Before World War I, we still had a sort of Taliban society in the West, dominated by the conservative Christians. Starting in the 1920s, it started reversing as we got secularization coming in. And this is when the corporations started becoming big advertisers, started moving into the culture. This is a World War II bomber showing how you had pornography was very started to become widespread in the United States at the time. And just after World War II, we had these two guys competing to dominate the United States in terms of who's going to run the society. Hugh Hefner, who set up Playboy, was a corporate man, versus Billy Graham. Well, who's been winning this? This is an adult porn story. You can do that. You know, in the United States now, it's an incredible society. It's fantastically different from what it used to be. It's now a society where you can get porn very easily, while the churches had to put up signs trying to stop this. So even in the 1950s, when we had what I call the Father Knows Best culture, which seemed conservative and Christian, you had the beginnings of rock and roll, which again is a corporatized thing. Drugs started coming in with Timothy Leary. The counterculture started with the Beatles and so on. And what's happened is the corporations have captured this culture. They've turned it to their own means, and they're using materialism, or genetic propensity towards materialism, to get the advantage. And this is what what I call the Sex and the City culture. That the American corporations and also in Europe have done an amazing job of converting cultures into material-oriented systems, consumer-oriented systems rather than religious. So the corporations do not want Francisco Franco's Spain to retake over the West. So these are the main factors in the United States in particular. In Europe, it's been a combination of the progressive policies, higher levels of societal security have done an amazing job of suppressing religion, combined with a consumer corporate culture. In the United States, it's mainly the corporate culture that's probably causing religion to increase. Okay, so I got a list here of the conclusions that we can come to. And what I'm trying to get across here is that there's a lot of firm science behind this now. A lot of these questions that we've had are being answered. The best overall socioeconomic conditions in history are always associated with low levels of popular religiosity. High levels of secure prosperity and safety consistently suppress popular religiosity. It's therefore not possible for the most successful nations to be highly religious. I want to emphasize that. If you've got a well-run country, it's always going to go non-religious. There's no example of that not happening. Religion can only thrive in the context of sufficiently dysfunctional socioeconomic conditions. In other words, for a religion to thrive, the country has to be run badly. There's got to be something really wrong with it. That can either be an impoverished country or a country like the United States where you have high levels of insecurity. But as I pointed out earlier, religion is not always popular, even when the societal environment is dysfunctional. I didn't really know that until about half a year ago, until I realized about the Hodson. Religion is usually a psychological mechanism for coping with dysfunctional socioeconomic circumstances. That's the main cause for most people being religious. That's it. Not genetics or means or so on. And in the United States, the extreme corporate consumer culture is the main factor driving secularization. In other first world countries, the combination of more secure prosperity and the corporate consumer culture has been devastating to religion, as we see here in Denmark. At the same time, conservative religious doctrines and values do contribute to societal ills. It's not just one-way thing. Religion does contribute to the dysfunction in nations. And part of this because they're based on ancient tribal mores from thousands of years ago, made up by people who had no idea how to run modern nations. Although it's been progressive policies that have most damaged religion, if conservative policies result in superior socioeconomic conditions, religion will suffer serious losses. What I mean by that is just say that you could run a nation on conservative economic principles and that work. That still wouldn't be good for religion because people would be secure and feel we just would lose the interest in religion. What this means is most people care much more about their daily lives and grand ideological struggles, and that's something we're going to have to recognize. Most people are not going to be persuaded by our arguments. Depends on what kind of daily lives they lead. And that's because most theists and non-theists, most average people on the street are not strongly intellectually committed to the worldview. It also appears it's easier for persons to abandon faith to abandon skepticism or religion. There's data coming out of communist countries that are not becoming highly religious since the fall of communism. So that maybe once you made people skeptical of God, it's hard for them to get back into them in the reverse. So the ideological war plays a secondary role to socioeconomics in the contest between religion and rationalism. So, take-home message. The most effective means of decreasing religious supernatural is by providing more people with economic prosperity and security. And as I pointed out earlier, the single improvement that would do most to seriously damage American faith is universal health care. And it's also a good idea. And that's the basic thing is that, you know, there's a bit of a movement in the United States. Atheists start saying, be good for goodness sake, not to trade the favor of a God. That's not a good reason to be good for good anyway. Why go to Africa to help the children for Jesus, like a lot of people say? Don't do it for Jesus, do it for you, do it for the kids. And this also applies in general. The best way to get religion out of countries is just run the country well. Just do that one thing, and that will do more to damage religion and bring us to a more secular society than anything else. So that's it. Thank you very much.